we're lucky to be white.
It's not luck, it's privilege.
We're privileged that people see us, not a color.
Privilege that we don't get stared at when we walk into the room.
Privilege that we don't get followed by security when we go shopping.
Or pulled over when we're in the wrong neighborhood.
We're privileged because society was set up for us, and our silence keeps it in place.
We're privileged, and that's unfair.
We're working on it. But let's hear what one of my favorite congresswomen had to say. She represents Dallas. She previously was on the show talking about how much she hated people in Texas and how we're deplorable. Let's hear what Real Housewives of South Oak Cliff, Jasmine Crockett, has to say about white privilege. And maybe just take it to heart. Don't you lecture her about things coming from the GOP side of the aisle. She's a Democrat, the party of the Klan. You can't make these people up.
Something that I just can't get over. I can't get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege. It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman, for you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle. And let me quote your now ousted speaker and what he had to say about the Republican Party and y'all's lack of diversity. When you look at the Democrats, they actually look like America. When I look at my party, we look like the most restrictive country club in America. So let me tell you something. Y'all don't know what white privilege looks like, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of something. You see, you want to talk about a two-tier justice system, and this is the only time that y'all have ever referenced it, when this country has a history when it comes to black and brown folk of having two separate sets of rules. And right now what you want to do is have two separate sets of rules because Mr. Moskowitz offered y'all a fair situation. He said he would vote for Hunter to be held in contempt if y'all voted to hold all, even if you remove all of the members of Congress. There's still other people that y'all haven't decided that y'all have excuses for, but y'all don't want to hold them in contempt. But for some reason, it makes sense to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, who has tried to comply. And let me tell you why nobody wants to talk to y'all behind closed doors, because y'all lie.
Okay, I want to do a point of order. The gentlewoman from Texas has used the word y'all too many times in the same sentence, and that is a point of order. We'd like to correct that. This is against our parliamentary rules. Can I get a ruling on that? It's amazing. When you're defending a crackhead, is what that little piece was written on my show notes here. When you defend a crackhead who's a really rich white guy, it's a really weird thing to do. That's why the whole point of white privilege was brought up. Here's a sober take by someone. Let's hear a little bit from Byron Donald spelling out like, hey, if you get served a subpoena, you're supposed to show up, even if you're the president's son. Let's just hold people to the basic standards. Let's try to have a rule of law that is based on fairness and not based on like rich crackheads sliding out on things. Here we go.
We issued a subpoena for him to answer said questions. He ignored a congressional subpoena as a private citizen. There are many attorneys on the other side of the aisle. If you had one of your clients in your private practice ignore a congressional subpoena as a private citizen, you would advise them not to, because they would be held in contempt and they would actually be punished by the Department of Justice. So I find it interesting to see today.
Yield so I can
I'm not going to yield, Mr. Goldman, because I had a question for you earlier. You didn't want to take my question, so I'm not going to take yours. Thank you. So, in closing, I will say, private citizens, yes, they have a responsibility to answer congressional subpoenas. They do. Hunter Biden had it, and he was flagrant. He decided to give a press conference. So we're going to do this business, and he should be held in contempt by the full House of Representatives. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Love it. I also love it when Dan Goldman is shut down. Very simple. The man said things that are true. He said words in orders that are an English sentence. He didn't have to rely on flashy nails and crazy fake hair, which is also cultural appropriation. Just common sense, common decency, saying things that are true.
Hey guys, what up? Total Control 871. Today, I'd like to talk about my mother. I very seldomly speak about her, but in light of all of the talk about white privilege and, does it exist, doesn't it exist, I definitely welcome a robust argument, and I would like to add to that argument today. I know that there are a lot on the alt-left who seem to They seem to believe in the concept of white privilege because it exonerates the urban black community as a whole. It both exonerates and liberates them from having to take personal responsibility as well as do the hard work that it takes to actually achieve the meritocracy that America is supposed to be built on. But we hear about white privilege and everything that it's supposed to entail. But today I want to talk about my mother, a white woman. My mother's name is Mary. Was Mary. There's a whole story about it, but when I reconnected with my mother after I was taken away from her by my father, a black man, like I said, there's a whole story to it. And I remember my Aunt Raleigh. I had asked her, how old she was, because I kind of was trying to compare. I was like maybe 12 years old at the time when I reconnected with my mother. No, I think 11. When I reconnected, 11 or 12, when I reconnected with my mother. And I asked my Aunt Raleigh how old she was, because I just kind of wanted to know in comparison to my mother how, I asked my mother how old she was. And for some strange reason, don't ask me why, but a type of, I don't want to say voice, but feeling or something came to me to say, when your Aunt Raleigh passes away, that's when you know your mother will have passed away. I lost contact with my mother a few years later, and I hadn't seen or heard from her since. And last October, my Aunt Raleigh, she finally did pass away. So I don't know if that means that my mother has also passed away, But I guess her name is or was Mary, and she did not live a privileged life. This I can tell you most assuredly. I didn't know her very long at all. Like I said, I came into her life when I was about 12 to 13. Yeah. So about a year and a half, we reconnected, and then I lost contact with her again, and then she was just gone forever. But in that short time frame, I did learn quite a bit about her life, what she went through. And I noticed that money was a constant issue for her. First thing, it definitely took like an entire year for her to save up the round trip fare to fly from Florida to New Jersey. It was a big monumental undertaking, and even still, she needed my father, a black man, to financially subsidize the trip. She gave my father gave my mother money, a few $100s, Christmas money. So when she came to visit me, she could give me Christmas gifts so that she wouldn't come empty-handed. It was all that she could practically do to scrape together the airfare, and my father basically stepped in to take over from there. Again, this is a black man. And when I went to visit her, after it was over the holidays, the Christmas, and I think it was the following summer, it was decided that I would spend the month of August, down in Florida, Tampa, Florida, and visit my mother. My living with my grandmother, Lord rest her soul, there's a story that goes along with it as well. But originally, Child Protective Service, or the foster care system, what have you, the foster care system was not involved in my sister and myself living with my grandmother, the woman that basically unofficially adopted us, and a black woman, mind you. And although she was biracial, if I'm being honest, to this day I don't exactly know, what was she made up of? I'm thinking it may have been Native American. Anyway, let me move on with my story. So it was decided that I would go and spend a month down in Florida, the month of August, with my mother. Looking back on the whole thing, I can't help but wonder, with my grandmother getting up in years, she was like in her late 70s at that point, were people thinking about, where is Amir going to go? Could we reunite him with his mother? Is this a possibility? So I go down. Now, mind you, I didn't come from a rich or wealthy family whatsoever. My father paid for my private school education, things like that. So we get the tickets, I think I had got some, went shopping and for clothes that I would wear down at Florida and what have you. And they sent me off with a little traveling money too. And I get down to Florida, and there were certain things that, from the whole month that I spent with my mother down in Florida, there was a couple of instances that just kind of stuck with me over the decades that let me know that this woman did not live a privileged life in any definition of the word. Probably the first thing was, she took me to a supermarket, hey, my kid's here, let's fill up the fridge, and fill up the fridge. Kind of think the Christmas Carol, Bob Cratchit, as he gets his little, as he goes shopping for his kids Christmas Eve with his little shillings from Scrooge. Kind of like that. So, okay, maybe not quite that bad, but you get my point. And we're at the supermarket, and I finally saw, because whenever I would go with my grandmommy to the supermarket, I would want it and forget to get it, or it wasn't available, it wasn't there. A can of nacho cheese dipping sauce. I always saw it in the supermarket, in the chip aisle. It had like the racks, and it was like, they were like on the side. They weren't, have you ever seen it the way it's put next to the chips and it hangs in racks, like a barrel kind of. Anyway, so there it was. I finally saw it, and I was like, "Oh, Mama, can we get the nacho dipping cheese sauce?" Now, mind you, this is just nacho dipping cheese sauce, a condiment. That's it. So she looks at it. She looks at the price. Maybe it was kind of a couple dollars or whatnot. Gets it. We get home and we get the big bag of the plain nacho chips, not Doritos, but plain, like Tostitos. There you go. Something akin to Tostitos. And so we open up the cheese dip, and we're like, I think we're watching a movie or whatnot on TV, and because there was no money for movies. And I dip it and I taste it, and it turned out that I didn't like it. It had a tanginess to it that I wasn't expecting. I could kind of taste the vinegar in it, and it just kind of turned me off. So I just kind of basically sat there and was just kind of munching on the Tostitos plain chips. And my mother took notice of it, and she was like, "You're not dipping in the cheese dip?" And I was like, yeah, I'll, I didn't want her to feel bad that she had bought it and I'm not eating it. So I dip in it again, and it just wasn't my thing. And I just noticed that from that whole impression I came away with, this was a woman that had bought something that was difficult for her to buy. It wasn't in her usual budget. I guess my whole presence there wasn't in her budget, And the whole thing is that something as simple as a condiment could strain her budget. That's what I'm trying to say. If I'm hopefully I'm not taking up too much time. That's what I'm trying to say. Something as simple as a dip sauce, a chip condiment, this stressed this woman's budget. When I went to visit her in Florida at when she picked me up at the airport, one of the first things that she did, we get out to the parking lot and puts my suitcase in the trunk, and she hands me a pair of cheapo 99-cent sunglasses. And granted, it's Florida, sunshine Florida, but actually what it was is that her car, this massive tank of a car, I don't know, I think it was Ford, I think it was light blue, most of it was light blue. I think there may have been some mismatched parts on it. The car had to have been every bit of 15 years old. This matter of fact, I know exactly what year. This is 86. It's like 86. The Transformers animated movie had come out in the theaters. And this car had to have been every bit of, it probably rolled off. It was maybe made in the 1970s. It might have been a Lincoln, but it was like every bit of 15 years old. It was huge. It was gigantic. And the fumes from the car's engine would come through the vents, and you had to wear sunglasses to protect your eyes. So it really didn't make a difference whether the car's air conditioner worked or not. You always had to drive it with the windows down. Otherwise, the fumes would overtake you. Again, nothing about this woman's life was privileged. And if the car and the nacho cheese sauce didn't drive that home to me, then definitely our rock lobster dinner experience, that definitely drove it home. You see, one of the things she wanted to know is she wanted to, write a little list, what do you like? So if I go to the market, I'll know what to get, things that you like. And I'm just rattling off things. I'm a kid, I'm just rattling off things. And one of the things I said was lobster. And now my mother worked as a waitress at the Ramada Inn. I guess there was a restaurant there at the Ramada Hotel, and she worked as a waitress. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure she was basically a waitress or something akin to it her entire life. This is a woman that lived in trailers, that lived in budget housing. Again, nothing about this blue-eyed, light brown, almost blonde-haired woman, nothing about her life ever spoke of privilege. Okay, she drove a hoopty. I don't think kids use that phrase anymore, but she drove around in a 15-year-old busted ass hoopty. She was a waitress working for tips, slinging hash for tips. And I remember one evening she comes home from work, and she has a little doggy bag with her. And she's like, guess what I got? I got a rock lobster tail. I was like, oh, wow. So she splits it with me. And basically, in the course of the night, I learned from her that, well, she didn't buy the rock lobster tail, and she didn't steal it either. Apparently, my mother would routinely feed herself off of the customers' leftover food. I mean, it wouldn't be like super totally gross, like a plate that, that she's going to scrape a plate into a Ziploc bag. It wasn't quite like that. She would eat the food whenever, because, tourists, they come, and quite often their eyes are bigger than their stomach. That's what it was more of. So whenever there was food that was either untouched or barely touched, she would take it home. So this is a woman, again, nothing privileged about this woman's life. She's eating leftover food, not just simply her own leftovers, but somebody else's leftovers. This is a woman who you couldn't even buy a simple condiment without stressing her budget. This is a woman that routinely drove around in a 15-year-old tank of a car on a quarter tank of gas. She was lucky when she had enough money to fill it up halfway. But no, there was never any money for a full tank of gas. And everybody knows who lives in Florida, you gotta have a car. You see, my mother, she spent every scraping dime she could get together to keep a shelter over her head, paying her rent and keeping that monstrosity of a car legal on the road. She did her best. She did her absolute best to make my month there a vacation as enjoyable as possible, and I'll always love her for that. Matter of fact, I even recall how it kind of broke her heart when I had to call home to my grandmommy, and remember, a woman of color, a black woman, and I had to ask her, I had to explain to her that, you know, my mother has run out of money, and I still got like another 2 weeks to go before I come back. Can you send me some more money? That, I didn't realize it then, but I would later understand that greatly embarrassed my mother. And if anything, it definitely drove home and settled the question over whether or not I would be going to live with my mother should my grandmother get too old. The answer was basically a resounding no. This woman could not afford to take care of me. She could barely afford to take care of herself. But we're supposed to believe that just because the color of her skin and the color of her eyes, that she is living a privileged life. So I would definitely caution our elected representative to watch their fucking mouth before you sound off telling people over how privileged you think they are, or how privileged you think they ought to be from your perspective. One thing's for sure, my mother could never go to a salon and get her hair and nails done all up like that. There was no money for that. People of every color and walk of life are out here struggling mightily. Refrigerators and cupboards are going barren and empty, all while elected politicians on both sides of the aisle, or as Oliver Anthony would say, the rich men north of Richmond, they get to live high on the hog. While people like us, we get to eat the leftovers, right? Total Control 871.